Welcome back to Massive Meats. I'm Doug, and today's massive meat are Dino Bones, aka plate ribs, aka brisket on a bone, aka beef ribs. Now, when you go to your butcher, which you're gonna have to go to your butcher, you're not gonna find these in your typical grocery store, ask for plate ribs. If you just say beef ribs, they're probably going to give you the back beef ribs, which are connected to the ribeye. They're gonna want most of that meat to stay with that amazing steak, so you're really not gonna get much. So when you do order them, make sure you ask for the plate ribs. The first thing you need to do with these beef ribs is trim them up if they're not trimmed already. There's this layer of fat on top, which generally fat's good. We like fat. Fat is flavor, right? So you wanna keep it for the most part, usually. However, you might be able to see underneath most of this fat, there is a layer of silver skin. We wanna get this removed so we can get the silver skin removed, so that all of our seasonings and flavor can really penetrate the meat. Very light, take as little off as you can just to get the majority of this to have that beautiful bright red meat color to it. So we have this all trimmed up now, and we really didn't lose much meat on it. We've trimmed off some of the top layers of fat. We trimmed off a little bit of that silver skin. We don't need to get every little bit of it. You know, we have a little speck of silver skin here. That's fine. We'll be able to penetrate that meat with the seasoning, with that flavor, just fine with that there. Some of these larger bits of fat that you still see here, the reason why we didn't trim that off the top is, again, it does bring flavor, but also it runs deeper down into that meat. And so you'd be digging out just a big cave of it, and you don't want to do that. You'd rather have it, let it bring some flavor to it. So this meat is really trimmed up nicely, and it's ready to be seasoned. So for today, we're using fresh ground black pepper, sea salt, which is coarse. It has to be coarse. You don't want to use table salt for this. And then garlic powder. We're keeping it really simple today. It's a big piece of meat, right? So when you look at these ribs, there's your bones. 1, 2, 3. All this on top is your meat. In between is some meat. Because there's so much meat here, you know, these are 10-inch bones. It's 5 pounds in these 3 in this plate rib and plate rack here. We can use a lot of seasoning. It can take a lot, and that seasoning is going to settle in nicely, and that flavor is going to spread. So don't worry about going too heavy on it. We're going to start with the salt so that we can see exactly how much we're putting on. We're going to use a nice, heavy, liberal coat of it. The plan for today is to get the smoker up to 275. That'll give us a nice temperature for the fat to render that's in between here. We're going to put it on for 3 hours. That'll let the smoke flavors get into it. That'll do its work. Again, the fat's going to render. After those first 3 hours on the smoker, we're going to be ready to take it off, wrap it up in some foil. We're going to put some beef broth in it to help it braise. That's going to tenderize this meat. So it'll already get that smoke flavor, and then it's going to tenderize while being wrapped in that foil. Once we have it wrapped in the foil, then we're going by temperature. We're waiting until this thing gets to 202, 203. That's when we know it's done. It'll be tender, and it'll be ready to bring inside and then rest for at least an hour. And then we can cut into it. And obviously the most important and best part, then we can eat it. So I want to make sure we get all these sides good. Again, we're applying heavy salt here. I'm not going to worry too much about the back. There's a membrane here. Different from pork ribs, you don't want to remove this membrane. This membrane is going to hold these ribs together, again, unlike a pork rib. So hold on to it, leave it as is. Some people choose to season it, some people don't. I'm gonna give it just a little bit. Most feel like you're not gonna really get anything past that membrane anyways. I got a little salt left here. Might as well throw it on. All right, now for the pepper. Oh, we're looking delicious. Now our garlic. Our beef ribs are seasoned. They got the salt, the pepper, the garlic. They're all set to go on the smoker for the next 3 hours. We are using big chunks of hickory and hickory only today. This should get some fantastic smoke flavor in that first 3 hours, so let's go put it on. We're holding perfectly at 278 degrees. 3 degrees off from our mark at 275. I'll take that every time. As long as we're in that neighborhood, we're gonna be cooking just fine. We are using a smoke stone today inside of here, and we do have a water pan that's gonna give us a little extra moistness. And again, our smoke is hickory. We got nice clean smoke coming out of here. This thing looks great. We'll see you in a few hours. It's been 3 hours since we put the ribs on the smoker. Now it's time to get a look at them. We've been holding steady right at 275, which is exactly where we want. Oh, okay. So we're already seeing a lot of that drawback from the meat back behind the bone. Now you can see really how big these beef ribs are. They've got a good bark going on them. You can see all that salt, the pepper, the garlic sitting on top of there. It's time to get this thing wrapped. We got the crust about where we want it. We don't really need to do much more to it. We're going to carefully place it over here. Figure out how to do it. These things are big. Get this closed back up. And what we want to do is form a little bit of a boat here. We've got a half cup of beef broth here. We're going to put that right down in it. And what we want this to do is we want it to braise a little bit. That's why we're using foil. We want it to really tenderize. Wrap this up kind of nice. It might take you a couple sheets. Now with this wrapped up in foil and it having that half cup of beef broth in it, now's where it's really going to get to be able to tenderize. We're going to let this go back on the smoker for another 2 hours before we check it. Then we're going to see what the internal temperature is. That'll tell us how much longer it needs to go. In total, we're looking for it to get just over 200 degrees. So we'll check back on it in a couple of hours. It's been 2 hours since we took the beef ribs, wrapped them up in foil. We put some of that beef broth in there, really give it the opportunity to tenderize. Now we need to check on it and see what the internal temperature is. Okay, let's get this unwrapped a little bit here. Let's peel that back. Okay. Again, the drawback from the bone, you can see why they call these Dino Bones. We've got our ThermoPro instant read thermometer. Let's start checking. This is pretty far along, 200, 201. We were aiming for 203. Really anywhere near here is about where we want to be. This is a 197, closer to that bone. 201 there. One of the things you can do is if you line this probe thermometer up in between these bones, there is that second, membrane down there. And if you can poke, you go all the way through pretty easily with no problem, I would say they're done, right? So knowing that we're reading right around 200, 201, 202, it's time to call it and take these things off. What we want to do is leave it wrapped up in this foil. We're going to take it in for a rest, and we'll show you how we do that here in a second. So last step before we actually get to cut them and do the fun part of eating them is probably the most important part, which is letting them rest. We've got an empty dry cooler. It won't fit down in it, so we actually had to turn it on its side. But we're going to set it inside this dry cooler, wrapped back up in that foil. And then we're gonna put the lid of the cooler on it. It doesn't need to be airtight. I would actually just kind of let it sit right over it, let a little bit of that air come in and out. That's okay. Close it up, but don't make it completely airtight. Give this an hour, and you're gonna have some amazing beef ribs as soon as it's ready. Now that these beef ribs have had an hour to rest, let's real quickly revisit what we've done today. We got these seasoned up with salt, pepper, garlic powder. We took the smoker to 275 degrees. We put it on for 3 hours, let the smoke really soak into the meat. We took it out, wrapped it in foil with a little bit of beef broth, put it back in for 2 more hours, still holding the temp at 275. We took our probe thermometer to check it afterwards. We were right at 202, 203, which is exactly where we want to be. We knew that these beef ribs were done. We brought them in, still left them in that foil, put it into a dry cooler, let it rest for an hour. That's what's gonna give us our good tenderization. That's what's gonna let this meat hold its juices. Huge shout out while we're right here. Big massive thank you to Haley Home and haleyhome.com for the custom cutting board. Get one with your last name on it. Use code MASSIVE at checkout for an extra 15% off. So, time for the moment of truth. Let's cut into these ribs. Oh yeah. Pull that apart there. Wow. Okay, that looks awesome. Can you see this really good? That looks awesome. Look at the smoke ring we've got around it. Look at the juice. I'm gonna bring this up a little bit. I mean, you can see it drip, literally dripping down onto the board. This is awesome. So let's get a piece off of it. I'm just gonna cut a little piece from it. Okay, that's why they call this brisket on a bone. Very tender, extremely juicy. Again, getting the real strong hits of that hickory smoke that we put on it. The salt and the pepper is strong, but like in the way you want it, because it's a big bite of meat. You can see just in the size that this is definitely no more than 1 per person. This is plenty to eat. I mean, and the flavor is just phenomenal. I highly encourage you to give this a try. Just remember, when you go to the butcher, make sure you ask for plate ribs. Shout out to the butcher that we went to here at TJ's Butcher Block and Deli in Cleveland. Shout out to Kevin for hooking us up and getting us some awesome ribs. If you decide to make it, please let us know. Send us your pictures. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Thanks for checking us out. If you like it and you enjoy it, please give us a like. Please subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment. We'll talk to you soon, and we'll see you on the next one.